certain hidden and little-known parts of Europe, there still exist remnants of the most primitive type of human life. A typical example is to be found in Spain. Only 60 from Salamanca, with its old university, famous for its literary and scientific traditions, live the Hurdanos. They are cut off from the rest of the world by a lofty range of mountains. To reach the Hurdanos, we are obliged to go through the village of Alberca, a comparatively prosperous community where the feudal system is still in existence. Alberca has a decisive influence over the Hurdanos, who have always been its unofficial vassals. This is the church of Alberca. These two skulls seem to preside over the destinies of the village. Most of the houses here have 3 stories. This type of architecture is unusual in Spain, giving the village a quaint medieval air. Over the threshold of most of the houses is engraved the following inscription: Ave Maria the Immaculate, who conceived without sin. The day of our arrival, we found the women of Alberca, arrayed in their finest dress, busily putting the final touches to their charms. We were told that it was in honor of their annual celebration. Going to the village square, we found the whole population gathered around 6 young horsemen, the latest newlyweds of the year. The custom requires that each one of these young men prove his prowess in the weird tournament of the cock. The villagers tie a cock to a rope by its feet and suspend it from one street corner to another. Each one of the bridegrooms on horseback must gallop by and wrest the cock's head from its body. After the ceremony, the bridegrooms parade the heads triumphantly all over the village. Then they offer wine to the assembled population. The cupbearers also distribute thousands of these wafers, and the crowd drinks to the health of the heroes of the day. Look at this infant, literally covered with the silver trinkets. Though actually Christian, these trinkets are amazingly like the charms of African natives. Evening has come, and we prepare to leave Alberca. By this time, most of the inhabitants are tipsy. From a high hill about 2 miles from the village, we perceive a range of mountains. In their folds lie 52 villages with a total population of 8,000. Here live the Hurdanos. But first we cross over the magnificent valley of Las Batuecas. For 4 centuries, this valley was inhabited by the white friars who preached the gospel in the main Hurdano villages. Today, one friar alone remains, the sole inhabitant of what is left of the convent. In this valley there are many caves which have preserved traces of prehistoric life. On the walls have been found remarkably fine paintings of bees, goats, and human beings. Toads, adders, and lizards are the friar's only companions. The vegetation is very luxuriant. There are more than 200 varieties of trees growing in utter abandon. But 3 miles from this valley, the soil changes abruptly. With the exception of a few fruit trees, there is nothing but briar and heather. The convent is surrounded by a wall about 6 miles in circumference. It protected the friars against the hordes of wolves and wild boars. Within the walls are the ruins of 18 chapels. Over these mountaintops, and we shall be in the midst of the Hurdanos. This village, situated in one of the poorest valleys, is Athertonilia. The white building is a recently constructed schoolhouse. In the streets, we catch glimpses of everyday life. Though the Spaniards as a race are naturally given to song, never once did we hear anyone singing in these dreary streets. Occasionally, we came across a wretched little stream trickling through the village. In summer, this is the only water available, and men and beasts make common use of it. Until very recently, bread was unknown to the Hurdanos. The bread these children are eating was given to them at school. The master usually makes them eat it in front of him, for fear that it be taken away from them by their half-starved parents. And now to school. These barefooted urchins receive exactly the same primary education as children all over the world. The clothing, or what there is of it, is brought into this region by those of the Hurdanos who go to Castile and Andalusia for several months every year. Upon their return, they exchange their clothes for potatoes. These children are famished, but they are taught that the sum of the angles of a triangle equal 2 right angles. Very frequently in the Hurdano villages, most of the children are pilus, that is, abandoned children. The Hurdano women walk for days across the mountains in order to get a pilu from the orphanage of Ciudad Rodrigo. They are paid 15 pesetas a month for taking charge of them. This sum used to feed a whole family, until very recently when the pilu trade was forbidden by the government. And what is this fair lady doing here? But even these children are taught the golden rule. This valley is relatively prosperous, with its walnut, cherry, and olive trees. And here is the village of Martinandran. Those round objects that you see, like the shells of fabulous turtles, are simply the village rooftops. On entering Martinandran, we are greeted by the ugly rasp of coughing. Most of the inhabitants of this miserable village are sick. Goiter, the plague of the upper Hurdano Mountains. This woman is only 32 years old. In a deserted street, we come across this child. Our guide tells us that she has been lying there for the past 3 days, but no one seems to know what her ailment is. One of our companions examines her. The child's throat and tonsils are terribly inflamed, but unfortunately we can do nothing about it. 2 days later, they told us that the child had died. What do the inhabitants of this barren country eat? As far as meat is concerned, only the most favored families possess a pig, which they save for a year and then devour in 3 days. Otherwise, nothing but beans and potatoes, and during the months of June and July, not even that. Olive trees grow on the more fertile spots, but the meager crops are often destroyed by insects. The goat is the only animal able to survive in this parched region. Goat milk is saved for the sickest members of the community. A rare treat is a crust of bread moistened with a few precious drops. Goat meat is eaten only when this happens. The chief source of industry are beehives, which produce a very poor and very bitter type of honey. The hives actually belong to people in Alberca, but are left with the Hurdanos during the winter months because of the comparatively mild climate. In the spring, the hives are taken back to their owners. One day we met these 2 Hurdanos taking a load of hives to Alberca on a donkey. Later in the day, we suddenly heard someone shouting for help. One of the hives had fallen off the donkey. While desperately trying to shake off the greedy swarm, he had upset the other 2 hives. An hour later, the donkey was dead. We were told that a few days before, 3 men and 12 mules had perished in the same way. May and June are the 2 hardest months of the year for the Hurdanos. By that time, the stock of potatoes has long been exhausted. There is nothing to eat, nothing but these unripe cherries. The Hurdanos have no choice but to eat them, and as a result suffer from chronic dysentery. Those of the men who have been spared by disease and fever set out for Castile and Estremadura with the hope of getting work in the harvest. Group of 10, 30, or 50 men with only a blanket on their backs. Empty hands, empty stomachs. Mile after mile in this endless search for food. Several days later, a group of the same men, returning as they went, with empty hands and empty stomachs. How do the Hurdanos build a field which is their only source of nourishment? First, they pick out a plot of ground near a river. Then, with the help of their friends and relatives, they clear off the thick undergrowth. They have only the most primitive tools, a pick and a shovel. Most of the Hurdanos have never even seen a plow. After having cleared the strip of land, they build a sort of stone barricade around it to protect the field from winter floods. When this barricade is up, they go to the surrounding mountains and fill sacks with richer soil. This alone usually takes them several weeks. See how thin this precious layer of soil is. The first year the harvest is good, but the soil soon loses its mineral and becomes barren once again. These narrow strips of land along the riverbank are the only cultivated areas. But when winter comes, the river often rises and wipes out the whole year's labor. Here is a typical Hurdano river, weaving its way through a miniature field. What with no money or domesticated animals, the Hurdanos have no way of procuring fertilizer. This family walks for miles up the steep mountain paths, searching for the wild strawberry tree. This plant effectively produces an inferior type of fertilizer. In spite of this, the peasants will endure the greatest hardships in order to obtain it. Shoes are a rare luxury, and the roads are cruel to naked feet. Here at last are the precious strawberry trees, but their trials are not yet at an end. For this apparently harmless plant is the haunt of the deadly adder. Peasants are frequently bitten. This is seldom fatal in itself, but the Hurdanos generally infect the wound by their unhygienic efforts to cure it. When the leaves have been gathered, the peasant returns to the village to spread them over the floor of his hut. Human beings and animals alike will make a bed out of them. Little by little, these leaves will rot and can then be used as fertilizer. This is a house in Fragosa. As in all Hurdano homes, the floor is strewn with the leaves of the strawberry tree. A typical Hurdano house. The few kitchen utensils are of the most primitive type. No windows or chimneys. Cooking becomes a dangerous and unhealthy enterprise. In summer, the rivers are nearly all parched. This is one of the reasons for the prevalence of a particularly venomous type of mosquito. The great majority of the Hurdanos have swamp fever, in spite of the desperate efforts of the medical units in the 3 trading posts. The larvae of the fever mosquito are obliged to come to the surface of the water in order to breathe. It is easily recognized because it always stays parallel to the water, whereas the ordinary mosquito takes a vertical position. This man is in the advanced stages of the fever. Everywhere we meet these pitiful human wrecks, suffering in stolid silence. Dwarfs and morons are very common in the upper Hurdes mountains. Their families employ them as goat herds if they are not too dangerous. The terrible impoverishment of this race is due to lack of hygiene, undernourishment, and constant intermarriage. The smallest one of these creatures is 28 years old. Words cannot express the horror of their mirthless grins as they play a sort of hide-and-go-seek. What is this gathering here? We are told that a baby has just died. And here is its mother. Death is one of the few events that break the monotony of these wretched lives. The women of the village all hasten to the bereaved home. There are no cemeteries in most of the villages. The tiny corpse is therefore put into a trough and carried for miles across the brush to the nearest one, in Nunya Morale. Here is a typical Hurdes cemetery, a wooden cross or a stick in guise of a tombstone. The only thing of luxury in the Hurdes villages are the churches. This one is situated in one of the poorest villages. This is one of the more comfortable homes. Note the efforts at interior decorating. When someone dies, it is customary for an old woman to ring the funeral bell through the deserted streets at the fall of night. All the inhabitants of a Hurdano home eat, sleep, and die in the same room. This type of house, with the stable on the ground floor and the combined kitchen and bedroom above, is considered a luxury. Exceptionally, it even contains a bed. During the winter months, the Hurdanos sleep in their clothes. They wear them year after year until they fall into tatters. The woman calls out into the night, "Awake, awake, lest the angel of death steal upon you unawares. Awake and say an Ave Maria, that his soul may rest in peace."